Okay, the topic we chose for our research was investigating the relationship between trade, inflation, and GDP growth using regression analysis. These are the table of contents. Research question and motivation. So research question was, does trade openness lead to higher GDP growth, or does inflation reduces GDP growth? And the motivation behind this was understanding these relationships helps design better macroeconomic policies in the developing countries. Okay. ओके ये हमारा डाटा था लाइक पाकिस्तान का हमने डाटा कलेक्ट किया था फ्रॉम वर्ल्ड बैंक से और इसके अंदर हमने 1960 से 2022 तक का डाटा कलेक्ट किया था फ्रॉम वर्ल्ड बैंक. We used for data analysis was Google Colab और ये हमने टूल यूज़ किया था. सो डिस्क्रिप्टिव स्टैटिस्टिक्स में जो हमारे पास था इट वाज लाइक the average GDP growth was around 4.99%, average inflation was 8.23%, and average trade to GDP ratio was about 28.91%. So basically these numbers give us the basic idea of the trends in the economy over the years. ये हमारे डिस्क्रिप्टिव स्टैटिस्टिक्स थे और जो हमारे वेरिएबल्स थे इसमें वो हमारे पास ट्रेड था एज अ परसेंटेज ऑफ जीडीपी, इन्फ्लेशन रेट लाइक ईयरली परसेंटेज थी एंड जीडीपी ग्रोथ ईयरली. Okay, next we did a correlation analysis. So we found that a negative correlation between inflation and GDP growth, meaning कि जैसे inflation increase करेगी तो GDP growth like it tends to fall. Next, trade and GDP growth had a very weak negative relationship, and trade and inflation had a moderate positive correlation, like that more trade might influence domestic prices. ये हमने correlation metrics perform किया था. नेक्स्ट हमारे पास आते हैं स्कैटर प्लॉट्स. स्कैटर प्लॉट शोड दैट हायर इन्फ्लेशन माइट बी लिंक्ड टू अ लोअर जीडीपी ग्रोथ. Okay, now coming to the main part, regression results. We ran a multiple linear regression with GDP growth as dependent variable and trade plus inflation as independent variable. So यहाँ पे like R squared was 0.105, which means the model only explains 10% of the variation in GDP growth. The coefficient for inflation was minus 0.13 and it was nearly significant with a p-value of 0.054. This supports economy theory that higher inflation can reduce GDP growth. And trade had a very small negative effect and was not statistically significant. So basically 1% increase in inflation might reduce GDP growth by around 0.13%, which is meaningful and matches what we expect in the theory. And trade does not have a strong or clear effect on GDP growth in this case. Maybe this could be due to other hidden factors जैसे structural issues in the economy. So इस वजह से भी results हो सकते हैं. Next comes the diagnostic test, जिसमें हमारे पास like Durbin Watson test में हमारी जो value थी it was 1.721, which means there is no strong autocorrelation. So and the other was VIF calculation, right? So all the values are under 2, so there is no multicollinearity. In simple words, like our variables are not overlapping. Is that we explored how trade percentage of GDP and inflation affect growth using multiple linear regression. So the model explained about 10.5% of the variation in GDP growth. Inflation negatively impacts GDP growth and is marginally significant. Trade showed no significant effect in the analysis, and the results suggest that controlling inflation might be more important for growth than trade openness alone.